What does it take for a tennis player to stop traffic in a city where basketball has always ruled? What kind of performance can transform a young athlete into the face of an entire nation almost overnight? And how does one unforgettable tournament turn a simple trip home into a celebration that feels more like a national holiday? For Alex Eala, those questions suddenly became reality. Just weeks earlier, she was fighting for every point on the biggest courts in the world, carrying the hopes of Philippine tennis into territory no Filipina had ever reached before. She wasn't simply chasing victories anymore. She was challenging decades of history, proving that a player from a country with almost no tradition at the highest level of tennis could compete against the sport's biggest names on its grandest stages. Then came the journey home. What should have been an ordinary arrival quickly turned into something extraordinary. Fans filled the airport. Crowds waited patiently for hours just to catch a glimpse of her. Families brought children wearing tennis shirts. Supporters waved Philippine flags. People who had followed every match from thousands of miles away finally had the chance to celebrate the athlete who had united an entire country through sport. But that was only the beginning. The emotional scenes continued far beyond the airport. Every public appearance attracted more people than expected. Social media exploded with photos and videos. News outlets covered every step of her return. And by the time she reached Makati for what was supposed to be a fan celebration, something remarkable happened. The event became far more than a simple meet and greet. Thousands of supporters poured into the venue, every available space filled with people hoping to see Alex in person. The energy inside the building quickly spread outside as even more fans continued to arrive. Security teams worked to manage the growing crowds while organizers adjusted plans in real time to ensure everyone remained safe. For many Filipinos, this wasn't simply about celebrating a successful tennis tournament. It was about witnessing history. For decades, tennis had existed in the shadow of more popular sports throughout the Philippines. Young players often dreamed without many national role models to follow. International success at the highest level seemed incredibly distant. Alex Eala changed that perception. Her performances gave countless young athletes something they had rarely experienced before, a belief that someone from the Philippines could compete against the very best players in the world. That belief is powerful, because sports have always been about more than trophies. They're about possibility. They're about giving children someone to imitate. They're about creating moments that convince an entire generation that impossible dreams may not be impossible after all. Few athletes experience that kind of impact at only 21 years old. Yet, that is exactly what appeared to unfold as Alex returned home. The excitement surrounding her wasn't driven by one single victory alone. Instead, it reflected everything her journey represented. The sacrifices made as a young player, the years spent developing far from home, and the resilience required to compete against the world elite. Those stories resonated with people. Parents saw determination. Young athletes saw hope. Former players saw progress. And casual sports fans discovered a new reason to pay attention to tennis. That combination created something much larger than any single match. It created a movement. However, one fascinating question remained. Why did this particular homecoming feel different from countless celebrations held for other successful athletes? Why were so many people willing to stand for hours simply to applaud someone returning from a tennis tournament? The answer may have less to do with statistics or rankings, and much more to do with emotion. Throughout her rise, Alex Eala never presented herself as someone chasing celebrity. Instead, she consistently projected humility, discipline, and gratitude. Those qualities often resonate deeply with fans, especially when combined with performances that inspire national pride. By the time she arrived in Makati, many supporters no longer viewed her only as a tennis player. She had become a symbol, a reminder that persistence can overcome limitations, a reminder that international success is possible regardless of where an athlete begins, and perhaps most importantly, a reminder that history is often written by people who refuse to accept traditional expectations. Still, behind every celebration lies another challenge. The louder the applause becomes, the greater the expectations grow. Every future tournament now carries additional pressure. Every opponent prepares more carefully. Every performance receives greater scrutiny. That is a reality facing every rising sports star. So while Makati celebrated one unforgettable chapter, another was already beginning, and the story ahead may prove even more demanding than the remarkable journey that brought Alex Eala home in the first place. The remarkable scenes in Makati didn't happen by accident. They were the result of weeks that completely transformed Alex Eala's standing, not only within Philippine sports, but across the international tennis community. Long before the cheers echoed through shopping malls and airports, everything began on the courts of Wimbledon. Every Grand Slam creates new stories. Most disappear within a few days. Only a handful become unforgettable. Alex's run quickly became one of those unforgettable stories. Entering the tournament, expectations were measured. She had already shown encouraging progress during the season, particularly on grass courts, but few outside dedicated tennis circles believed she could become one of the biggest talking points of Wimbledon. That's what made every victory feel increasingly significant. Each round presented a tougher challenge. Each match demanded a different solution. And with every win, television audiences in the Philippines grew larger. People who rarely watch tennis suddenly found themselves waking up early or staying awake late just to follow live scores. Social media timelines filled with updates after every point. Sports pages that normally focus on basketball or boxing began placing tennis headlines at the top. Something unusual was happening. The country wasn't simply following results. It was emotionally investing in the journey. That distinction matters. Many athletes become popular after winning championships. Far fewer manage to make fans emotionally connected before the final outcome is even known. Alex appeared to accomplish exactly that. As her confidence grew, so did the belief among supporters that something special might be unfolding. Still, one enormous obstacle remained. Eventually, the tournament placed her opposite one of the biggest names in women's tennis. On paper, it looked like the kind of matchup where experience would naturally prevail. Her opponent possessed years of success at the highest level. She had already proven herself under Grand Slam pressure countless times. Most analysts viewed the contest as another opportunity for the favorite to continue her campaign. But tennis rarely follows expectations perfectly. From the opening games, Alex demonstrated that she wasn't intimidated by the occasion. She matched the intensity. She refused to rush points. She accepted long rallies instead of trying to force spectacular winners. Perhaps most importantly, she looked emotionally composed. That composure stood out. Grand Slam matches often expose young players. The atmosphere becomes overwhelming. The crowd grows louder. Every mistake feels magnified. Momentum can disappear in seconds. Yet Alex continued trusting her game. When difficult moments arrived, she responded with patience instead of panic. When pressure increased, her body language remained steady. That emotional discipline became one of the defining themes of her tournament. Of course, every high-level tennis match eventually reaches a moment where strategy becomes just as important as shot-making. Against elite competition, raw talent alone is rarely enough. Court positioning matters. Serve placement matters. Shot selection matters. Recognizing when to attack and when to defend can decide entire matches. Observers notice that Alex consistently searched for opportunities to extend rallies rather than ending them too early. She appeared willing to construct points carefully, forcing difficult decisions from across the net. That approach reflected growing maturity. Instead of chasing spectacular highlights, she focused on winning individual points, one at a time, game by game, set by set. Those small victories slowly created something much larger. As the match unfolded, television commentators began discussing more than individual rallies. They started talking about belief, because belief changes everything in sports. It spreads from athlete to coach, from coach to supporters, from supporters to an entire nation. By the later stages of the contest, many viewers sensed they weren't simply watching another upset attempt. They were watching a player discovering just how high her ceiling might actually be. That realization energized everyone following the tournament. Back home, viewing parties reportedly became louder with every crucial point. Phones buzzed continuously with updates. Families celebrated together. Friends messaged one another in disbelief. Across the Philippines and among Filipino communities around the world, the atmosphere felt increasingly electric. Then came the breakthrough. When the final point confirmed one of the biggest victories of her young career, the reaction extended far beyond the tennis world. Sports broadcasters immediately recognized the significance. Newspapers rushed to update headlines. Television programs interrupted regular discussions. Social media platforms filled with congratulatory messages. The victory wasn't treated as just another tournament result. It was celebrated as a milestone for Philippine sports. Yet one fascinating detail often gets overlooked: the emotional reaction from Alex herself. Instead of celebrating with overwhelming confidence or dramatic declarations, her response reflected genuine disbelief. That authenticity resonated with millions of people. Fans often connect most deeply with athletes who remain grounded during extraordinary moments. Alex's reaction suggested someone who fully understood the magnitude of the achievement, while remaining aware that the journey was far from complete. Ironically, that humility only made supporters admire her even more, because true sporting icons are often remembered not only for how they win, but also for how they carry themselves afterward. However, Wimbledon wasn't finished testing her. As the tournament continued, another experienced opponent stood between Alex and an even deeper run. This next challenge would reveal something arguably more important than any upset victory. It would reveal how a rising star responds when momentum begins to shift, and why that lesson ultimately made her unforgettable long after the tournament ended. Every breakthrough in sports eventually reaches a defining question. Can the athlete keep climbing after the biggest victory of their career? Or was that unforgettable performance the highest point they'll ever reach? For Alex Eala, that question arrived almost immediately. After the emotional high of one of the tournament's biggest moments, there was barely any time to celebrate. Grand Slam tennis doesn't pause for inspiring stories. The draw keeps moving, and every player left in the tournament has earned the right to believe they can win. Her next challenge was completely different. Unlike the previous matchup, this wasn't simply about upsetting a favorite. It became a battle against experience itself. Across the net stood an opponent who understood exactly what it meant to play deep into Wimbledon. Someone who had already navigated the emotional swings, the media attention, and the physical demands that come with surviving the second week of a Grand Slam. That experience matters, perhaps more than most casual fans realize. At the highest level of tennis, nearly every player can hit incredible forehands, powerful serves, and remarkable passing shots. The biggest difference often comes in the moments that can't be measured by statistics. How do you respond after losing 3 straight games? What happens when an easy volley suddenly sails long? Can you recover mentally after missing a crucial breakpoint opportunity? Champions answer those questions differently. They don't erase pressure. They learn how to compete through it. Throughout the match, Alex continued showing many of the qualities that had brought her this far. She fought for every point. She refused to surrender momentum easily. She continued believing that another comeback might always be possible. Several stretches of the contest reflected exactly why so many analysts believe her future remains incredibly promising. Even when the score became difficult, her competitive spirit never disappeared. She chased every ball. She searched for every opening. She forced her opponent to earn nearly every important point. That's a quality coach's treasure. Effort can never guarantee victory, but consistent effort often creates opportunities that less determined players never receive. Still, experience gradually began influencing the match. The longer it continued, the more evident it became that veteran composure can quietly shape crucial moments. Big points seemed to favor the player who had already lived through similar situations, not because one athlete wanted victory more than the other, but because one had spent years learning how to manage those exact moments. There is a subtle difference. Young players often focus on winning spectacular points. Veterans understand that ordinary points frequently decide extraordinary matches. That lesson appeared throughout the contest. When opportunities emerged, the experienced player often made the simpler decision: a safer target, a higher percentage shot, one fewer unnecessary risk. Those tiny choices rarely generate headlines. Yet over the course of an entire match, they can determine who advances. Eventually, the tournament ended for Alex. Disappointment was inevitable. No competitor reaches the second week of Wimbledon hoping merely to participate. Every athlete wants more. Every athlete believes another victory is possible, but something fascinating happened after the final point. Instead of focusing exclusively on the defeat, conversations quickly shifted toward the bigger picture. Why? Because the tournament had already changed perceptions. Before Wimbledon, many observers viewed Alex as one of several talented young players trying to establish themselves. After Wimbledon, she was being discussed very differently. Now, people weren't asking whether she belonged. They were asking how far she could eventually go. That is a profound change. Respect at the highest level of professional sports isn't given freely. It must be earned repeatedly, tournament after tournament, season after season, performance after performance. Alex had taken an important step toward earning that respect. Her game had demonstrated versatility. Her mentality had impressed observers. Her ability to remain composed under extraordinary pressure had become impossible to ignore. Of course, every breakthrough also creates new challenges. Opponents begin studying more film. Coaches spend additional hours preparing scouting reports. Weaknesses that once escaped attention suddenly receive detailed analysis. Every serve placement, every return position, every preferred rally pattern, nothing remains hidden for long. This is one of the most difficult transitions young stars must navigate. Surprising opponents is one thing. Continuing to defeat opponents after they've fully prepared for you is something entirely different. That phase now begins. And history reminds us that many promising careers are ultimately defined during exactly this period. Some athletes struggle once expectations increase. Others discover another level. The coming months will help answer which path Alex follows. However, regardless of future results, Wimbledon accomplished something no ranking could fully measure. It inspired people. Across the Philippines, young children reportedly began paying closer attention to tennis. Coaches described growing excitement surrounding the sport. Parents who previously knew little about professional tennis suddenly found themselves discussing tournaments, players, and future possibilities. That's the hidden impact of sporting success. A great performance lasts a few hours. Its influence can last for decades. Sometimes one athlete changes an entire generation's imagination. And perhaps that's why the celebration in Makati became so emotional. The crowd wasn't only welcoming home a successful tennis player. They were celebrating what she had already made possible and what she might still achieve. But as unforgettable as that welcome was, the next chapter of Alex Eala's journey may prove even more demanding because the tennis world has officially taken notice. And from this point forward, every tournament becomes a new opportunity to prove that Wimbledon was not the destination, but only the beginning. The celebration in Makati was unforgettable. The cheers, the flags, the endless lines of supporters hoping for just a few seconds with the young woman who had inspired an entire nation. But beneath every smile and every photo opportunity was a reality that every elite athlete eventually faces. The celebration always ends. The next tournament always arrives. And the expectations only grow louder. For Alex Eala, that may be the greatest challenge of her career. Not learning how to win, but learning how to carry the weight of becoming one of the biggest names in Philippine sports. Because success changes everything. Before Wimbledon, Alex entered tournaments with relatively little external pressure. She could focus almost entirely on her own development. Every victory felt like a bonus, and every defeat became another lesson. Now the equation is different. Millions of fans are watching. Television networks are paying closer attention. International media are following her progress. Every draw announcement becomes news. Every practice session attracts cameras. Every result sparks conversation. That is the hidden cost of becoming a star. The expectations don't disappear after one magical tournament. They multiply. And history shows that many gifted athletes struggle not because their talent disappears, but because the spotlight becomes impossible to ignore. However, Alex's journey so far suggests she may possess one quality that separates great players from merely talented ones: perspective. Throughout her rise, she has consistently emphasized improving one match at a time rather than becoming consumed by long-term expectations. That mindset matters. Professional tennis is one of the most demanding individual sports in the world. There are no teammates to rescue a difficult day, No substitutions. No timeouts. When momentum shifts, the player must solve every problem alone. That requires emotional discipline as much as technical ability. And emotional discipline often determines who enjoys a long career at the highest level. Another fascinating aspect of Alex's story is what it could mean for tennis in the Philippines. Great athletes often leave two legacies. The first is measured through trophies, rankings, and championships. The second is measured through inspiration. How many children pick up a racket because they watch someone succeed? How many families decide that tennis is worth exploring? How many local coaches suddenly find more students eager to learn the sport? Those changes rarely happen overnight. They develop quietly. One academy welcomes a few more players. One local tournament attracts greater attention. One young athlete begins believing that the world's biggest stages are no longer out of reach. Years later, those small moments can completely reshape a nation's sporting future. Perhaps that is why Alex's homecoming resonated so deeply. It represented more than gratitude for a successful Wimbledon campaign. It represented hope. Hope that future Filipino players may benefit from a path that once seemed almost impossible to imagine. Hope that international tennis will continue recognizing talent emerging from the Philippines. Hope that one remarkable breakthrough becomes a foundation for many more. Of course, none of this guarantees future victories. Professional tennis remains brutally competitive. Every tournament introduces new matchups. Different court surfaces demand different adjustments. Confidence rises and falls throughout every season. Injuries, form, scheduling, and countless unpredictable variables can influence even the most talented careers. That uncertainty is exactly what makes sports so compelling. No one can accurately predict the next chapter. Will Alex continue climbing the rankings? Can she build upon the confidence gained from her breakthrough performances? Will future Grand Slam tournaments bring even greater opportunities? Only time and her performances on the court will answer those questions. What already seems clear, however, is that she has altered the conversation surrounding Philippine tennis. She has shown that players from countries without a long tradition of Grand Slam success can still dream boldly, compete fearlessly, and capture the attention of the global sporting community. Those achievements cannot be erased. Long after individual match results fade from memory, people will remember the emotions. They will remember families gathering around televisions. They will remember airports filled with cheering supporters. They will remember the packed crowds in Makati celebrating one of their own. Most importantly, they will remember the feeling that for a few extraordinary weeks, an entire nation stood behind one young athlete chasing history. Whether Alex Eala eventually lifts Grand Slam trophies or simply continues building an outstanding professional career, her story has already become larger than tennis itself. It is a story about sacrifice, about courage, about believing in a dream that many considered unrealistic, and about what can happen when preparation meets opportunity on the world's biggest stage. As the tennis calendar moves forward, new tournaments will arrive, new opponents will emerge. Fresh challenges will test every part of her game. The applause from Makati will gradually fade into memory, but the confidence earned through that incredible journey and the inspiration created will travel with her wherever she competes next. Because every great sporting story eventually reaches the same point. The underdog becomes a contender. The contender becomes a target. And the target must prove, again and again, that success was never an accident. For Alex Eala, that next chapter is only beginning. And if her remarkable rise has taught us anything, it's that writing off determined athletes is often the biggest mistake the sports world can make. The crowds in Makati didn't gather simply because of what Alex Eala had already accomplished. They gathered because they believed they were witnessing the beginning of something even greater. Only the future will reveal how far that journey goes. But one thing is already certain. Alex Eala didn't just come home to the Philippines. She came home having inspired a nation to dream bigger,